The morning Damien Ashford Krane opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a white ceiling. Not his ceiling. A hospital ceiling, flat and empty and smelling of antiseptic. He stared at it for a long moment. He did not know his own name. He did not know where he was. He did not know who had placed the single chair beside his bed, or whose hand had left a glass of water on the small table to his right. He knew only one thing, and he knew it with complete certainty. Something was wrong, and someone had caused it. He sat up slowly. His body was wrapped in quiet pain, the kind that lives in the bones and does not announce itself loudly. There was a bandage along the left side of his head. His left hand trembled slightly when he raised it to look at it. He studied the tremor, the way a scientist might study a new specimen, with interest, without fear. A nurse entered the room. She was young, with tired eyes, and a clipboard she held too tightly. The moment she saw him sitting upright, she stopped walking. Her expression shifted into something he could not immediately name, but he recognized the shape of it. She was surprised, and underneath the surprise was something else, something closer to unease. He said nothing. He simply watched her. She found her voice. "Mr. Krane," she said carefully, "you should be lying down. You only came off the ventilator 2 days ago." He looked at her steadily. "What day is it?" October 25th. He absorbed this. The number meant nothing to him. No date came before it. No calendar, no chain of events connecting him to that number. He was a man standing in the middle of a hallway with no idea which direction he had come from. "Bring me whoever is in charge," he said. She blinked. "That would be Dr. Sen. She's in another consultation right now, so—" "Then wait outside the door until she is available," he said, "and then bring her." There was no anger in his voice, no impatience, just a quiet, absolute certainty that what he said would be done. And she brought the doctor. Dr. Nadia Soon was a composed woman who had spent 17 years working in neurological trauma. She was not easily unsettled. She walked into the room with the measured calm of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news without flinching. She sat down across from him, introduced herself, and explained what she knew. His name was Damien Ashford Krane. He had been in a serious accident on a highway outside Geneva 11 days earlier. His vehicle had been struck with significant force. He had sustained a traumatic brain injury that had affected a part of the brain responsible for autobiographical memory, the part that holds names, faces, personal history, and the long thread of experiences that make a person feel like themselves. She told him he might recover some or most of those memories over time. She told him it was too early to say what would return and what would not. She told him the important thing was rest and patience. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What is the current legal structure of my company?" She paused. "I don't know the details of who manages the executive decisions while I'm here. There is a woman named Alara Voss who has been in contact with the hospital. She's listed as your legal counsel. She's been here every day. Call her in." Alara Voss entered the room 20 minutes later. She was a tall woman in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and the posture of someone who had learned not to show what she was feeling. She had clearly not slept well in 11 days. But when she walked in and saw him sitting up, looking at her with calm and focused eyes, something in her face broke slightly, just for a second, and then she composed herself again. She told him everything: the company, Krane Global, $47 billion, real estate across 4 continents, energy contracts, private infrastructure, a defense consulting division. She told him about the empire he had built. She told him about his life, his brother Marcus, his offices, his history. He listened to all of it the way a person listens to a story about someone else. None of it produced a feeling of recognition. There were no flashes of memory, no emotional anchors, nothing that said, "Yes, this is mine, this is me, I remember." It was simply information, and he processed it the way he processed everything else, cleanly and without sentiment. "What is the share price today?" he asked when she finished. She told him. It had dropped 11% since news of the accident reached the market. "Who has been buying the dropped shares?" She hesitated. "We're not entirely sure yet." "Find out," he said. Before you leave the building today. She stared at him for a moment, then she nodded and left to make calls. He sat back against the pillow and looked at the ceiling again. He had no memory of who he was, but some part of him, deep and quiet and impossible to damage, already knew exactly what needed to be done. It was the strangest feeling, like being a stranger in his own house, but knowing exactly where every door led. His brother Marcus arrived the following afternoon, with flowers and a careful expression. He was younger, better dressed in a way that seemed deliberately effortless, and he smiled with his mouth, while his eyes calculated. Damien did not know this man, but within 4 minutes of conversation, he knew 2 things about him. First, Marcus was afraid of something. Second, Marcus was trying very hard to appear as though he was not. Marcus spoke at length about the board's concern, about the importance of stable leadership during a difficult period, about a proposal he had put forward to manage things temporarily while Damien recovered. He used words like compassion and family and stability with the ease of someone who had practiced them. Damien let him finish. Then he said, "Thank you for coming," and looked back at the window. Marcus waited for more. Nothing came. He left. That evening, Ilara returned with a tablet. She showed him the board memo, Marcus's caretaker proposal. It was professionally written, legally sound on the surface, and had enough support to pass within 48 hours. Damien read it once. He set the tablet on the bed beside him. Then he picked up the phone that Ilara had placed on his nightstand that morning and dialed a number. Ilara watched him. She had not given him that number. She had not mentioned that name. She did not know how he had arrived at it. He spoke for less than 2 minutes. 6 sentences. His voice was unhurried and precise. When he ended the call, he handed the phone back to Ilara and said, "The proposal won't pass." It didn't. By the next morning, the vote had collapsed quietly, and Marcus's carefully arranged coalition of board support had dissolved without explanation. A man named Wei Chen, who held a significant silent stake in Krane Global through a holding company in Singapore, had communicated his position overnight. Nobody on the board wanted to move against Wei Chen's alignment. Ilara sat in the hospital chair that evening and looked at Damien for a long time. He was reading through financial documents she had brought him, his face calm and focused. "How did you know that number?" she finally asked. He looked up. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I just knew." She did not ask again. On the 19th day, a delegation arrived from a competing company, a firm called Orlov Group, controlled by a woman named Petra Orlov, who was known throughout the industry as someone who moved like water. Slow, quiet, and capable of getting through any crack in a structure if given enough time. She had been buying Krane Global shares quietly for 2 weeks. She had prepared a proposal that was framed as a partnership, but was designed as a slow transfer of control. She had timed it perfectly, approaching when the leadership appeared fragile, when a man without his memories was still lying in a hospital bed. She had not expected him to walk into the meeting himself. Damien discharged himself from the hospital on the morning of the 19th day, against Dr. Soon's advice and over Ilara's protests. He dressed in clothes Ilara had brought from his home, clothes that felt unfamiliar on his body but fit him perfectly, and he rode in a car to the Krane Global offices in Zurich. The building was glass and steel, and very tall. When he walked through the lobby, the staff who saw him stopped what they were doing. Some of them looked as though they had seen something unexpected. Others straightened almost without knowing they were doing it. Nobody had told them to. There was simply something about the way he moved through a space that rearranged the air in it. He walked into the boardroom where Petra Orlov's delegation was already seated. There were 4 of them, polished, prepared, carrying printed documents and confident expressions. When he walked in, the confidence dimmed slightly. They had been briefed that they might be dealing with an incapacitated executive. They had not been prepared for this. He sat at the head of the table. His left hand rested on the surface, and the faint tremor was visible, if you looked closely. Nobody mentioned it. He let them present. He did not interrupt. He did not take notes. He simply listened with the focused stillness of a man who hears everything. When they finished, he waited 3 seconds. Then he spoke. He did not raise his voice. He did not perform. He simply walked through their proposal the way a person walks through a house they know well, pointing out exactly what was behind each door. He identified 3 inflated valuations buried in the financial appendix. He named a misrepresented asset figure on page 11. He pointed to a transaction listed in the back section of their document that did not match the regulatory filings their firm had submitted 6 months earlier in another country. He asked one question about that last point, and the lead delegate could not answer it. The meeting ended shortly after. The delegation left with their documents and their adjusted expressions, and Petra Orlov, when she received their report that afternoon, did not speak for a very long time. The story of what happened in that boardroom moved quietly through the industry within days. By the end of the week, the Krane Global share price had recovered most of what it had lost. Not because of an announcement, not because of a press release, because of the quiet understanding, passed from person to person like a whispered fact, that Damien Krane was back at the table. And then came the file. Rashid Al-Karim had worked for Damien for 9 years. He was head of security, a man of very few words and extremely precise action. He had spent the 19 days while Damien was in the hospital doing one thing, building a complete picture of what had actually happened on the road outside Geneva. He placed the file on Damien's desk on the 20th day. The accident had not been an accident. The attack had been arranged, the timing, the location, the method. All of it had been planned carefully by someone with detailed knowledge of Damien's travel schedule. That kind of knowledge did not belong to strangers. It belonged to people on the inside. The trail, once followed carefully, led to a board member named Gerald Hurst, a man who had been with Krane Global for 6 years, who sat in meetings and shook hands and attended company dinners. A man who had been quietly taking money from the company's accounts for 4 of those 6 years, moving it in small, carefully structured transfers through a chain of companies in 3 different countries, accumulating over $300 million. He had arranged the attack because he believed Damien had discovered the scheme. He had been right. A set of audit queries Damien had initiated 3 weeks before the accident had been getting very close. Damien read the file from the first page to the last. He set it down. He looked out the window at the city below. Then he turned to Rashid. "How long to build a complete legal evidence package strong enough for a criminal prosecution?" he asked. Rashid said, 3 weeks, if we're careful. Damien said, "We'll do it in 4 days." They did it in 4 days. Ilara assembled the legal case. Rashid provided the evidence chain. Damien worked through the night on 2 of those evenings, cross-referencing transaction records and identifying the precise regulatory violations that would make the case impossible to dismiss as a civil matter. He had no memory of learning how to do this. He simply knew how to do it. On the 5th day, the package was delivered to the Federal Financial Crimes Authority. The arrest of Gerald Hurst occurred the following Tuesday morning. By Tuesday afternoon, Marcus Krane had resigned from every Krane Global advisory role he held. He did not make a public statement. There was no confrontation, no dramatic scene. Damien had sent him a single message, a scanned copy of a document Marcus had signed 3 years earlier that connected him, indirectly, but provably, to the effort to conceal Hurst's transfers. No words were attached, no demand, no threat. Marcus left quietly. It was the only intelligent thing he did. In the months that followed, memory returned to Damien in pieces. Not all at once, not in any organized order. A face would surface unexpectedly, someone he had once worked with, a name attached to a handshake in a city he could not immediately place. A moment would return, the sound of rain on a rooftop somewhere in Portugal, the particular quality of light in an office where he had once signed a deal that changed everything. The memory of his father's voice, arriving one evening without warning while he was reading a contract, so clear and close that he stopped moving for a full minute. He recovered more than the doctors had initially predicted. Not everything. There were still gaps, still stretches of his history that remained dark and unreachable, but enough returned to give him back the shape of himself, the context, the story, the record of where he had been and what he had built. The strange thing, the thing he mentioned to Ilara only once, quietly, over coffee one evening, when the city was dark outside the windows, was that none of it changed anything. The memories, when they returned, felt like photographs of a life he had continued living without needing them. They were his. He was glad to have them back. But they had not been what kept him standing. Alara looked at her coffee cup for a moment. Then she said, "I watched you run this company for 19 days without knowing your own name. I think I understood something during those 19 days that I hadn't fully understood in the 7 years before them." He asked her what that was. She looked up at him. That the memory was just the story, she said. The power was always something else. He was quiet for a moment. Then he looked out at the city, 43 floors below him, still moving, still full of people making decisions and building things, and trying to hold what they had built. He did not disagree. Some things cannot be taken from a person by force or by accident, or by the ordinary cruelties that life arranges without warning. They are not stored in memory. They are not written in any file or contract or record. They live somewhere deeper than all of that, in the way a person meets silence, in the steadiness of a voice, in the instinct that does not ask permission before it moves. Damien Ashford Krane had lost his past. He had kept everything else. And the world, which had watched and waited and tested him in the way the world always tests a man when it believes he cannot see, had learned something it would not forget. The Alpha King had never ruled through memory. He had always ruled through iron.